Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1502 Introduction to Community Media, and this is a short video overview of the topics that will be covered in the 9th lecture, which is called DIY Media. I've produced the PowerPoint slides, there's some clips and some videos that were included in this, so I won't share the PowerPoint slides. But what I will do, I have done, is I've posted the notes up onto the DMU wiki, so you can access them and download them from the TECH1502 pages in the lecture notes section as a PDF. And this has got any background quotes, and it's got any diagrams that I use, so it's all the essential elements that kind of underpin the lecture. What the topic is to cover this week is the idea that community media occupies a space which is based around, if you like, that kind of bottom-up approach that we've been talking about, where it's an alternative space to the mainstream media, the kind of media that's industrially produced, that has a high level of professionalism, that's organised around certain formal types of corporate organisation with structures and management chains and things like that. But community media, if you like, has part of community media occupies a very different place, in which people come together to do on a very small scale and a very temporary part. It happens in a kind of ad hoc and temporary set of actions, and it's kind of the idea that this is so different from the mainstream that actually it's very difficult to get a grasp sometimes of what it is, what it's about, how it works, what lots of different, there's such a wide variety, and there's such a kind of sense that people are doing things for many different reasons and with many different senses of expectation about what they're going to get out of it, who they're talking to. So we're dealing with a kind of something which is kind of quite loose and quite elusive as well. Actually, it's very difficult to define. But what we'll look at is, one, it occupies, DIY media occupies kind of alternative spaces, which are often defined as being kind of outside of or against the mainstream. But also we'll look at the idea, and there's a long history of this in terms of it's a form of cultural production, DIY media, which is kind of very immediate for the people involved. It's about, kind of crafting and making something yourself, and not having to go through long commercial processes to get things to a market with distribution. It's kind of very much, kind of what you can do yourself. Do it yourself is quite literally the way that we think about this. So it's got a high level of kind of amateurism. So it avoids, and in fact it pushes aside any kind of sense of professionalism. It puts aside any kind of sense of, kind of rigorous output, and what it says is, let's look at this. It might be lo-fi in the way that we make these things, but it's something which we've generated and created ourselves, and therefore it is more meaningful and more capable. So we're looking at media which is very independent, highly creative, and bridges things that we want to discuss that the mainstream media could never get into. Kind of the big searchlight approach of a lot of mainstream media is in contrast to, if you like, the individual torch approach that people have when they're producing fanzines and local newsletters and making podcasts and photo projects, which they run for themselves, which then aren't fed into any kind of machine. So we're looking at something which is very democratic. It's argued to be very democratic, and actually it can lead to things which are quite resistant against some of the kind of corporatization, the kind of globalization agendas. And this brings things back to what we can do ourselves. And indeed the question is raised, should we call it DIY, do it yourself, or DIO, do it ourselves? So there's a kind of collective response to this as well. So we'll cover this in the lecture with some clips and some video links to look at, which I've embedded in the PowerPoint. If you want to do some reading, the chapter 3 in the Ellie Rennie book is quite a good one to look at. Again, it's not specifically related to DIY media, But what it talks about the issue of quality, and it talks about the idea of media serving some form of public interest. So that's worth looking at. I've also posted a link to a programme which is available on the Box of Broadcasts, which is about the history of black communities and black identity in Britain, and how that was kind of shaped by various kind of worldviews, if you like, prejudicial worldviews, and where we are today with cultural identity if you're from a black background. So there's also a program which I've linked to on YouTube, which is called Can We Do It Ourselves? It's in Swedish, I think, so it's got subtitles. And it looks. I've watched about the first 10 minutes of it, and it looks really interesting. So I'm going to go back over that myself. But it kind of feeds into this idea of, do we do things on a local basis for ourselves, or do we have to fit in with a big systems approach, a kind of corporate, big bureaucracy kind of approach? When it comes to media, when it comes to communication, who defines what we do? So that's the overview of the lecture for this week, and we'll kind of try and connect this up in the workshops with John as well. So I'll see you on Tuesday.